All right. So for all you listeners out there, I was just literally telling the story of putting my foot in my mouth, uh, which I feel like as a parent, it's, it's a really normal thing. And I don't really know if it's like a dad thing, but I do that constantly. I don't know what your take is, but I know that I do it often.
I feel like you know me well enough to know that I also do that all the time. Like we could probably list quite a few times that I've stuck my foot all the way in my mouth in like really important scenarios. But I don't know. We could totally chalk it up to a parent thing,
Oh my God. Yours is probably my favorite
And I
by
don't know
far.
how we tell this story without it like possibly entering like the ears of the person that it's about. So we're gonna just gonna have to skip it, and one day maybe it'll be appropriate for a podcast.
But what I think is so valuable, and for those listening to this conversation, I'm so excited to have it. I'll make sure that I give her a proper introduction, aside from the intro that you just heard. What makes this so tremendous is like how loving and
Trying.
compassionate and real you are. And so a lot of the ways that I have seen you observed and or heard the ways in which you put your foot in your mouth is just comical to me.
I'm actually crying because it's just like it's funny. I woke up this morning and I started my day with so much negativity. And I then the internet went out. This is not funny, but I'm going to tell this story now. My nana was a wonderful woman, rest her soul. But she always had this like terrible attitude. Like she was very negative. And today, after my day started bad, can I curse on here? After my
Oh,
day started
100%.
shitty, uh,
Shitty. That's okay.
then I was watching my son before his nap, and he's starting to learn to walk, and he's getting into everything, and he pulled the the cable that's like in this like secret compartment that's connected to the TV, and the TV went out like at that moment. Like the TV stopped working, the cable stopped working. I'm like, fuck, like you just like blew out our cable box, and then my internet went out, and I'm like, oh my god, this is the third time I'm gonna have to reschedule Desi. Like, what is going on? And like, come to find out that there was like a nationwide outage of Xfinity in New Jersey, or a New Jersey wide outage of Xfinity in New Jersey for like 2 hours this morning. And I'm sitting here being like, Noah, what did you do? And so to get back to my grandma, my mom, I told my mom that story because I was just like unleashing on her this morning. And she picked up my son a little while ago, and she was like, Dad was laughing so hard because he remembers that there was like a power outage in the state of New Jersey that was a really bad storm when he was like 5 years old, and your nana blamed. And I was like, all right, I'm done. I need to be better, positive mental attitude. Let's go, like get back on your shit and let's be a better human. Like,
All
I can't
right.
be compared to that.
All right. There's three things that I want to say here, and it's very likely that in all of the joy of seeing your face, I'm probably going to forget the third, but who cares? First thing, I totally forgot that it's been three times that we almost had to reschedule. I forgot about the first time, but I just chalked that up to just Jenna being Jenna. She's a busy lady. I respect it. So, and she has the best intentions, even though she puts her foot in her mouth very, very frequently. um, the second thing is Xfinity. I hate Xfinity out here.
Mm-hmm.
Like they've had weird outages too, and strangely, I feel compelled to blame someone, and it's a powerless feeling
I
because you
mean,
can't do anything about it.
I couldn't even Google is power down like wherever, like because I had no internet, like it was not working.
And because you couldn't get in your account because their interface,
Was
Xfinity,
down.
if you're listening, I'm very cool with never taking you on as a partner because you pissed me off.
Horrific.
Third thing. All
Oh.
right, we're getting there. My brain is there today. The third thing, there's nothing like being reminded of, and this is just a loving thing to say. We all have people in our lives where like I don't want to be like that person, and it's always a really good reminder when stuff like that happens. And I feel like parenting does that. You get reminded of certain areas or things that you're like, I really value this mentor, this figure in my life, but these things I don't really want to do. So there's nothing like parenting that'll remind you of that.
Every moment of every day. And it reminds me of like past versions of myself too. Like, okay, I had this horrifically unrealistic expectation that like becoming a parent was going to make me more patient and more understanding and more this. And it's like you just realize every day that like you have to take care of your own shit before you pass that on to another human. And I think that that's really hard because in the moments when like I think Tony, our previous mentor, taught me this phrase and it's always stuck with me. Like the anxiety of overwhelm leads to paralysis. And like every single day, I feel this anxiety of overwhelming like everything and it leads me to do nothing. It's like when I feel that way and when I'm feeling that like bubbled up overwhelming of like Noah's lists and the family's lists and now the holidays list and my business list and my personal life list, like of all of these things that I have to
All right,
do.
I gotta go.
I do nothing, right? Like it's insane. And it's so hard. And I think, being able to like understand and compartmentalize some of that is a gift, but it's also something I'm definitely working on.
It's so hard. And you talk about Tony being a past mentor. Tony, I have no idea if you would ever listen to this, man, but shout out to you for a lot of the gems that you provided with a lot of us. One of the things that I remember, we were on a group call together, and when you step into, this, Jen, like you step into entrepreneurship, like it's a really huge vulnerability project because you're just like, I don't know if this is going to work. I know I'm investing in this, but like, can I do this? And one of the things that he said during one of our group calls, and all of us like rose our hand, and he was like, listen, you don't build out something like this and put so much of a expectation on yourself that you don't care for yourself. Like you can't be that person midway through your gym set to stop working out because your list is so big. Like you don't want that. And I remember all of us just like raise our hands because I don't know about you, but I've done that plenty of times.
Recently.
I've gotten yesterday. It's such a hard thing because I think we put expectations on ourselves, and I don't think that it is different across jobs, self-development, parenting. Just I feel like it's a very human issue, and one that I'm like constantly working on, and it is so damn hard.
I agree. It's so hard. And it's hard too because when you want to prioritize yourself, and I think could be a conversation on boundaries, right? Like, you are, by doing that, not prioritizing something or someone else in that moment. And when you feel overwhelmed and when you have that anxiety, that can be really hard to chug along, but like recognizing that you need it is everything. And that's something I still struggle with, especially now, and our brains are beautiful and terrifying things that can tell us stories that we just, we have to rewrite.
I mean, I think that'll be another conversation for another pod, because I find myself having existential crises like weekly when I understand the multitude of what the brain does, its capabilities and its limitations. That's another pod for another time. Okay. All right. So we're 8 minutes in. I have not even introduced you to our guest real quick.
Fine.
I started doing this on accident, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. Because I feel like just from a conversation standpoint, you get to catch the vibe as a listener of the people who are talking to one another. So I don't really care, and I'm unapologetic about it. All right, Jen. So now we're 9 minutes in.
Let's make it 10.
Let's make it 10. So for our listeners out there, I'm so excited to have this wonderful human being on. You already heard a little bit of the intro and a lot of the ways in which I give Jenna her flowers. But one of the things, Jen, that I am really excited to do today, aside from making you cry, is to tell your story. and it's one that I think is really beneficial, and because you and I have been through aspects of your life together,
Mhm.
right? And from what I know and understand about you, it's a huge reason why I call you a really, really great friend and a really passionate friend, because you're just that type of person. And so to have you on really means a lot to me. So welcome to the pod.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And, you were on season 1 of our podcast, and we
Oh my
actually,
God.
I can't even remember the episode that we talked about it, but we were joking about it. Could have been one that just, anyways, when we were on our podcast, when you were on our podcast, we brought up that episode very recently in a recent episode because it stuck with me, and we covered so many good things, and we were
Hmm.
also like slamming beers at 9 a.m., which is why the podcast has been rebranded. but it
Well,
was a fun memory for the
I
time.
all right. So we're gonna bounce around a little bit, and I think that's okay because, like I said, it's my podcast, and I'm
Correct.
unapologetic about it. And the listeners that we've had up to this point already kind of know. Let's go ahead and start there, because I mean, the podcast now is freaking crushing it.
It's my passion project right now. That it
Ugh,
definitely is. It really has brought me a new lease on life. And I
yeah,
mean, I think my story can be broken up into 3 different pieces. And it is my ultimate like start in dietetics that led to my rock bottom in my
hmm,
personal life, and my personal self, into entrepreneurship. Like that
yeah,
rock bottom sparked me actually finding a coach, a mentor, and changing my business into something that I actually could do
yeah,
full time. And then that into having a baby, which changed my business all over again. And this postpartum part 3 has been incredibly surprising, challenging, frustrating, beautiful, like all of the things that I was not prepared for, because I see on social media like so many other people that moms go back to work, their kids go to
yeah,
daycare or
yeah.
not, or whatever it is. And like they bounce back, quote unquote, in all of these different ways. And, almost 10 months in, nothing about my life has bounced back. Like it may be bouncing, like it's
Describe.
doing something, but like nothing is bouncing back. And like that's okay. I've come to terms with that. But like I have these moments, and yesterday was one of them. And like you gave me the most beautiful intro saying that I'm a positive person. And I miss that like unapologetically, like unconditional positivity that I once had. Because yesterday, and like daylight savings time was this past weekend, and I'm trying to launch all of these things in 2 days that I work per week. And I just feel like every avenue of my life has been like spinning out of control and like not sticking. And my perfect
Yeah.
baby, quote unquote, that was sleeping so great, daylight savings time, like he's in like the 3% of babies that like get extra affected by daylight savings
Isn't that
time.
how it happens?
It's like amazing. Like, and I literally, that's how negative I woke up this morning. And I was like, why can't one area of my life that I've worked so hard on just like follow through on something? Because he was up at like 4, and I'm like, this would be 5. Like, it's not even like your normal wake up time. So now you're 2 hours off. Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand. Anyways, so we can talk about any avenue of my story, but my postpartum journey, the podcast was what kept me going into coming back to work. And so I'm
Yeah.
very grateful for it. So for the listeners, if you haven't listened before, I co-host the What the Actual Fork podcast with one of my very close friends, Sam Previtt, who is Find Food Freedom. It was previously Drunk Dietitians, which we thought was funny. And then we realized the link between addiction and eating disorders is very, very real. And it's no longer a funny title. Our like tagline is that we like to fuck up and teach and learn from our fuck up. We like to fuck up publicly and learn from them.
Yeah.
And so we did an episode about our relationship with alcohol and our apologies for the insensitivity of the name of the podcast. And we've changed it and rebranded. to what the actual fork, which really just encompasses the humor that we're going for, and also like the what the actual F is going on in the nutrition world, because it's a lot. There's a lot there. But it has been my saving grace and just something that gets me like excited to do, because you get to have conversations like this.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Jen, too, one of the things that I thought was really amazing, and we'll talk about like just you personally and some of your own brand changes. I like to think of brand changes, especially in my life, as like ways in which I am changing and seeking some sort of evolution. And whoever comes along for the ride gets to do that with me. Right. And in a lot of ways, you've done that at least twice. And we'll talk about the first time in a little bit. Right. Um, but I'm also wondering too, you guys had this brand shift, and we'll make sure that we, put all the links in all the show notes so that you all can go check them out because they're amazing. Um, One of the things that got brought up, and I know you and Sammy have mentioned it, was this like concept of being sober curious,
Hmm.
right? And looking at your relationship with alcohol and kind of moving from there. And I guess my big question for you is like, did parenting start to push you to start to think about areas that you might have been distracting yourself, or what was that process for you?
I think that even so now, my husband and I at this moment, and this is just, because we recognized, let me backtrack. I think parenting and alcohol is like this glorified thing. Like, and I mentioned this on an episode of our podcast that like, I don't think it's like, I wasn't thinking about like the phrase, like, okay, mommy needs a glass of wine kind of thing, as how that could potentially impact my son. And I don't want
Yeah.
him to be that kid that's like, that knows what wine is, or that
Yeah.
knows that mommy needs it, or it's mom, like whatever that is. And I'm not faulting any parent that has done that, that does that. That's
Hmm.
not at all what I'm saying. But I definitely saw that, after 10 months of being sober pregnant, that it was something that I craved and I missed, and maybe for the wrong reasons. And I
Yeah.
think that right now, my husband and I have a rule in our home, because we would have these stressful days and then immediately go to have a drink together,
Hmm.
at home, obviously, because can't leave. Um,
Yeah.
have a baby. But we're like, why are we drinking this? Like, what is the purpose? And like,
Yeah.
what is the need here? And so right now, the two of us have just decided like we're not going to drink during the week,
Hmm.
because it's not necessary for us, and the glasses of wine that we share together on the weekends are more special. And that's
Yeah.
just where we're currently at. But I think it could go so many ways. And what we talk about on that episode too is that, why do you drink? And it's okay if you have a good relationship with alcohol and it's safe for you, it's okay to enjoy it. But like, do
Yeah.
you understand your limits, and do you understand your emotions tied to the choices to drink? And,
Yeah.
it's loaded, especially if there's a history of eating disorders or disordered eating, alcohol typically plays a role in that as well. So it can be tricky.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even just with the experience that I've had with eating disorders, oftentimes there are co-occurring things. And when, let's say for someone, when the alcoholism gets to be worked on, the eating disorder will spike. And it's like kind of like whack-a-mole, right? From a clinical
Totally.
perspective, right? And I
Addiction
really,
happening.
yeah, exactly. And I really loved what you had said too, because it's funny as I've sort of examined my own relationship with how I distract myself. That could be alcohol, it could be work, it could be a bunch of things. It kind of goes back to being present enough to understand, like, am I trying to dodge some uncomfortable feelings? Because there was one moment, especially very really early on, that my daughter was maybe less than a year, and I would come home from a job that I really really hated, and I couldn't stand it, and I would crack open a beer and turn on the TV. I
Mhm.
remember my wife came over to me one day and was like, "Hey, just want to check in on you. Are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm just got home from work, same stuff. I hate my job, type of thing." She was like, "Okay, look, I don't think that you need to do anything about this right now." But she's like, now that our daughter is growing up, I don't want her later in life to be like, oh, dad gets home and has a beer. Like, I
Right.
don't want that." And I remember hearing that, and I was like, wow. I mean, that's early on. That's what my dad did. That's what his dad did. guarantee
So,
before that. And I kind of just went down the line. And I mean, that was a gem that I sort of take with me to this day, where it's like anytime that I am distracting myself, being present enough to be like, what feelings am I trying to avoid?
mm,
Uh, because it's something that happens a lot. And I think a lot of people miss out on opportunities. And again, if you're someone who has a couple beers, like, okay, cool. It's just going back to exactly, Jen, what you had said is like, okay, well, why are you doing this?
it's the intention. And it's the same
Hmm.
thing we talk about, or in my practice with food, like what is
Yeah.
your intention behind that choice? Do you want to eat the low carb bread because you like it? Or is your
Yeah.
intention that, it doesn't have carb, blah, 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 whatever. We don't have to go into triggering language, but like, it's the same thing with the drink. Is the intention to share a moment, to celebrate something, to be present with your spouse and it's something you're doing together, whatever it is, that's one
Hmm.
thing. But if the intention is, I'm stressed and I don't want to think about my stress, which is the
Yeah.
why I was engaging in, a drink multiple nights per week, you know, is it necessary? Is it helping me? Is it helping anything? Probably not.
Yeah.
So
I I always thought, because I've seen my dad do this. Like I remember very early on, he was like someone who would, in his sobriety, 'cause, he was able to do close to like 15 years. Um, he would get like the O'Douls, like the non-alcoholic
yeah,
beer,
I remember my
and
grandpa drinking those.
right, and I always thought like, what's the point? And this is me as a little kid. It's like, wait,
Right.
hold on, what did you ask, right? But then I've gotten to a point now, like I actually stumbled across it through one of the Men's Health articles that I did about non-alcoholic beers, because they were claiming that it was a great recovery beverage, and I was like, no, it's not. Like, yeah,
Carbs, maybe?
it's
I
yeah, like
don't
carbs maybe, like doesn't have
know.
any protein. Anyway, uh, this might hurt my chances to
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 get
work with them.
sponsored.
Oh wow. But I've actually started like using a lot of the different IPAs and things like that, and it's funny the way that I'm probably a year removed from like using them. I'll have them with dinner, and I'm like, I'm good. Like, oh, okay. I don't need this. Like, if I'm stressed, then I need to go on a fucking walk.
Right.
Like,
Right. And if you want flavor, like some people say, like they want something to drink with flavor, but like in our
yeah,
society, we're so fearful of juice, right?
yeah,
That like we'd rather have a glass of wine than like apple juice or whatever it is that you like. But that's again a whole nother conversation. But like there are flavored beverages that you can drink that also have bubbles, even.
yeah.
I'm really into that stevia soda, not because I don't want real soda, but because I
Oh
actually like
God.
this flavor.
Yeah,
But it's like a cream soda flavor of Zevia. And like
yeah,
I have that now every night with dinner because I enjoy the flavor and it's not water that I drink all day long.
yeah,
And again, like parenting has taught me now to these boundaries in a different way. Like when I was pregnant, I was working 14-hour days, like until 8 p.m. at night. My husband and I would eat dinner separately or together. But like most of the time, like after we finished eating, I was back on my computer, just like finishing things and whatever else. And like now, I don't have that option, first of all. But second of all, like my baby goes to bed between 6:45 and 7, and like those 2 hours, 7 to 9, before Matt and I pass out, like
yeah,
those are our only 2 hours together of like conversation and
yeah.
connection and like being Matt and Jenna, not mom and dad. Sorry if you heard that. I don't know why. It's on Do Not Disturb. Can you hear that?
Yeah, you're
So
good.
I don't know why that happened. But it's our only 2 hours to be Matt and Jenna and not mom and dad. And sometimes it's our only 2 hours of like at all, of the
Yeah,
whole week that we get that. Like it's not like we have date night every week and whatever else. So it's really important to me that it's not met with just being distracted from each other or trying
yeah,
to escape those moments. And I think that that's like an I'm like clicking that in my head right now of how
yeah,
important that is.
yeah. I mean, if we look at where you are right now, Jen, I met you when you were doing something extremely different, from the side of your messaging and whatever that was. So let's go ahead and back up. how Jenna grew up, who Jenna was, right? Stepping into adulthood, because you and I have had some really, really frank conversations about
Really.
where you were at that time. You had talked about, I remember, where you and Matt were at that time. So let's go ahead and kind of backtrack a lot. Upbringing. Tell us about it.
I mean, I had a wonderful childhood. I have a mother who's a personal trainer as her trade. My dad is super athletic, just always. I think it's funny, like now that we unpack my dad though in like real life, like now that who I am today, like he definitely has some eating, relationship with food things that we
Sure.
always joke around and talk about. But, my
Sure.
mom never did. My mom was never the mom, and she never dieted in front of me. She never talked poorly about her body. She may have felt certain ways, but like it never seeped into me. I was the kid that ate toaster strudels and Pop Tarts for breakfast. Like we had no like off limit foods in my house. And my upbringing has absolutely nothing to do with my disordered eating, which is very rare. I think very, very rare. To be honest with you, I've also always been an athlete. Like I played soccer on the boys team when I was 4, and I played on the boys team instead of the girls team when there was an option when I was 5 and 6. And like,
That makes total sense.
I
If
know.
anyone's ever seen Jenna hit a speed bag, like, oh, this female will whoop my ass.
And like I've always loved sports, and I've always loved athletics and exercising. And again, it wasn't until I was maybe in high school that, I realized that my body was being categorized as like a soccer body, right? Like I was on varsity and I was the captain and I was strong, but like that's not the body that was in at the time magazines. Like God bless these children today that have it on their phones at all times, but it was magazines that we were being compared to at the time, right? And so because I'm 34, let's just say it. So this was quite a few years ago. And so I think, I went into school not knowing that I wanted to be a dietitian, but I knew that I loved food and I thought I had a good relationship with it. But like on the back burner, there was definitely some disordered thoughts and trying to exercise off everything I ate type of, relationship going on there with my body. I knew I loved food. I knew I loved people. The lady at I don't know what you even call it, my counselor was like, you should be a dietitian. And I was like, cool, let's do it. Like, I had no idea what a dietitian was, what they did, nothing. Yeah. I went through school, did the internship. That was a surprise. Junior year, I was like, oh, by the way, what? Like, yeah, that was a big one. And then long story short, when I got out of school, I went right into clinical. Like I went into clinical. I did long-term care. I did subacute care. I did clinical in the hospital. And then I was living in Hoboken. I became an in-store dietitian in a grocery store for ShopRite. And at that time, I was living in Hoboken. I was partying a lot. I was going out a lot. I met my, at the time, boyfriend, then became fiance, now husband, now baby daddy, the whole thing. Hey. Met him. I met Matt in 2011 in Hoboken. And it really wasn't until I was getting ready for my wedding that my body image, everything about me just crashed and burned. And that was like my gateway drug, was hiring a personal trainer pre-wedding, who picked apart. I think he's a great man, and I think that he does the best with what he could do. And he's a UFC champion, heavyweight champ who I was working out with, and he was my trainer. But he picked apart every insecurity that I ever had about myself. He said it out loud. Things I never said, he found them, he said them out loud, and we worked on them. He was going to fix them, heavy air quotes. And that was really the stem for me that broke, my self-worth and my image of myself, my confidence. I was always known as such like a confident person. And then I started to become obsessed, and I knew I had like athletic gifts to some extent, right? Like, I can run, I can do whatever, I can lift. And I was like, okay, then I'm just going to be the best at whatever workout that I do. And that was really the straw for me. My relationship with fitness, it wasn't even food. It was my relationship with fitness that really broke me, because fitness for me, again, was my gateway. And then I abused the food aspect on top of it, meaning like taking things away and, you know, trying all the diets and pills and potions and whatever else. So, you know, I got married, and after the wedding, you know, the pictures are over and whatever else, you think you go back. And I just never did. I just continued on this path. And my business turned into, okay, I've like, quote unquote, been able to get, heavy air quotes, like, you know, leaner by exercising. Maybe I can help other people do that. And so that's where I started to focus my business efforts. And we ended up moving, and I joined a gym. And a couple of the coaches there were like, hey, I have a client I could give you. I have a client I could give you. And I started down this path of like, oh, because of the way I look, other coaches want their clients to look like me, so I can help them. And then, so this spiral that I was getting caught in was, I can't not look this way. I have to look better than this so I could get more clients and be blah, 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 blah. And like, you see where this is going. This is
such a slippery slope.
Like, and it was this constant in my head struggle of, you know, I can't eat that. I have to work out more. I was exercising. In this time, I was like thinking I was going to be so successful at this. I quit my full-time job. I had a great job. I became the manager for that chain of grocery stores for all of their dietitians. I left that cushy job because I thought I could do this. And so I was overworking. I was over exercising. I was under fueling my body. And like, where was time for my marriage? Right. And that's really what we talked about. I had relationships like with people that like I spent more time with, I should say, than I did at home, because these people were the ones feeding me this, like, you're so amazing, you look so amazing. And my husband was probably like, this is not the girl that I married. Like, you know? So it's like these people were telling me, you know, how amazing I was and how great, you know, my business was going to be. I had to keep going. And meanwhile, like, you take off the makeup and my skin was a mess. My hair was falling out of my head because I was so malnourished and overstressed, and fight or flight was just like rocking. And it was a really bad slope. And so there was clearly a rock bottom, because it's not sustainable. And after that, I hired Tony. I still thought that I could do this. I could be an entrepreneur. I could have a business, but I needed help. But at that time, I wasn't ready to change my message, but I knew something needed to change. And I was what we call in the intuitive eating space, I was fence sitting. Like, I had one leg over in like weight loss, abs side, and the other leg was like, food freedom is amazing. And like, you can't really be an effective dietitian when your message is so unclear and when you're so unclear. And I was still so unclear because I was still so fearful of my body changing and what it was going to do to my business. And fast forward, you know, I took the step. I started doing the education. You know, my husband and I went to therapy. We did what we needed to do to heal internally. I continued on therapy alone to heal what I needed to heal, and to really understand that like, your weight is not your worth was a lesson I needed to learn too. In short. And so, you know, with that said, I've now turned this business into an intuitive eating, food freedom focus, where in my heart and my passion, fitness is still something I love, but I've personally healed my relationship with it. And my focus has become so much more on how can I help other women or men do the same? So I have like two different avenues of my business. It's like this fitness focused area with intuitive eating on the back burner, and then the full blown disordered eating recovery, intuitive eating, which has been interesting to kind of navigate. But then, you know, throw a baby on top of it. And I went, like I said, working 14-hour days to now I have a full-time babysitter. I have a babysitter 2 full days per week. And on Tuesdays, which is today, my mom takes Noah to a music class and a park, and then brings him home for his second nap. So I have like a couple hours to do stuff like this. And that's where I am. How was that?
It was great. All right, we're gonna go to end the podcast right now.
So
No,
bye.
I, Jen, I have so many questions about what you just shared because I think it's really beneficial for people to hear your take on this. Um, So anytime, because I still consult with eating disorders, you and I have had conversations about that. I guess just some things part of my passion projects, and I get to work with my wife, which is great because that's where we fell in love working together in that same space as her being the therapist. Um, I do this exercise when we're talking about body image, and I do a little bit of education talking about external messages, right? And how oftentimes they go from external and then they start to morph into internal messages, right? Which in most cases in that space, they are very shame driven. You mentioned earlier on that like others would say that you had a soccer body, correct? I mean, what did you think about your body at the time? Because I heard you say things like I was athletic, I was fast, I did this, like what did you think about your body? And then what did others say about it?
I always thought that I had a lot of your typical, what you think about like high school mean girls, right? Like those figures in my friend circle. And I'm shorter, which is genetics. And I was quote unquote athletic. And I always use the word strong to describe myself, and I still do. And my genetics back then and still today is just more muscular. And that's, what the story that started to run in my head was. It's like, that's just who I am. Right. And so now I have to be really strong. And it's like that, like you said, like external into internal is okay. Like that's me. So I have to live up to that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So more of like, strong legs, big butt. Like that was me, and it's still me today. And it's not a problem.
No,
But back then it was in my head, it was different than everybody else. Or what I thought, which is also, and I need to put this out there too, that I also recognize and know that I have thin privilege. I do. I've never lived in a larger body, and I'm not claiming that I understand that at all. This is just simply answering a question of, how I felt and the story that ran through my head into my inevitable breakdown.
Well, because even as you were describing the story of the breakdown, like I mean, if I would have checked my heart rate, like I know for a fact it would have been going up because I knew at some point, just like you had said, it wasn't sustainable. And I think for anyone listening to this podcast, anyone who really resonates with the message, you are either currently going through this right now, or you have, or it might happen if you aren't aware, right? And so you talked about that slippery slope, and then finally that moment. Jen, what was that moment for you?
It was a place that you just know. I guess that's the only way that I can say it, like without giving like so many details on it. It's just, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And it's the same with any type of addiction, right? Like this is an addiction that I'm describing. And there has to be a breaking point where you recognize it. The movie The Devil Wears Prada, they say it in there. Like when you're
haven't seen it.
Oh my God, what? You need to see it.
I know.
Everybody else has seen it, and they'll get what
it's a real point of contention in my house right now.
Go watch that tonight. But in that movie, they say to the girl, the main character, Anne Hathaway, in it, like when your personal life is spinning out of control, then you've made it, right? Like in your industry. And like it's a terrible thing to say because it's not at all sustainable, and it's not helping us, be the master of everything, right? I think there's a Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote about that. Like you can have it all, just not all at once, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality. Is like everything in my life that I cared about was spinning out of control. And I've shared this on other podcasts in the past that like I was so regimented and so fearful of breaking my routine, because a break in my routine was a break in what I physically looked like. Like that's a connection that needs to be made here, because that was my driver. But I was so regimented that like in the summertime, and everybody who knows me knows how much I love the beach, I was prioritizing my workouts over weekends or days at the beach with my family, who, again, if you know me, you know how much they mean to me. And so that right there was like that unsustainable, like, check, like, click, like, this isn't right. Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, you want to work out, you could do this any other day or time. Like, your whole family is having dinner at the beach tonight or breakfast or whatever it is, and you're not going to go. Like, okay. Or you're going to go later and sit in 14 hours of traffic because I live in New Jersey to go down the shore in the summer. Like, no. Like, there were these little things where it's like, this doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't work. And for what? And like, that's something that I need people to hear. Like, for what? Nobody else in my life that really loved me wanted me this way.
No.
Like, right? And like, that's something that's really, really hard to recognize. It's like, you're doing this to yourself and there's no end game.
Which is scary to say. I'm going to have to watch that movie because what you described
Matt's favorite
with
movie.
like, I mean, it's obviously been a huge pop culture thing. So like, all right, backstory. I barely just saw Star Wars like a year ago because I'm really into
Star Wars.
But I love it. And it's honestly a huge reason why like it's the Can't Believe I Made It podcast and we talk about heroes' journeys because I love the hero's journey. I love Joseph Campbell's work. So yeah, I like Star Wars. So going back to what you were saying, I can't tell you, Jen, how often, and it's a huge reason why like I've stepped out of just doing nutrition coaching into more life because like I get people like that, really high performing people that are like, I made it. I am completely unhappy. I'm unaligned. I don't know if I'm going to continue my marriage. Like if I have kids, like they don't, I'm not really connected to them. Like this isn't what I was promised. And I think it's so fruitful to get there. And it's also a very scary place if you're choosing to stay there for whatever reason. I wonder, Jen, and you and I have had conversations about what parenthood has done for us. For me, I needed my very, very leadership. We don't call it bossy. We call it leadership. My very leadership driven 5-year-old right now. Because I needed an example and a reason to keep going when I feel like I'm not doing enough or I feel like I'm just not there. I needed a reason to be my healthiest self. And so I love the photos and the videos and the images of your little guy. And it brings a lot of joy to me because it's like my friend is living in fulfillment right now. And that is really amazing. So let's touch on parenting for you. What has parenting taught you?
Everything.
Aside from
I've learned nothing in life until I became a mom. And that's like the God's honest truth because Noah has highlighted all that I love about myself and all that I hate about myself every single day. And I'm so confident saying that because I, as a human being, know I'm flawed. We all are. But like, I see my flaws in he has helped me see them more in a way where like, it's like, hey, you can't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think being an entrepreneur on top of that is devastatingly difficult and beautiful because there are no rules and you make your own. But at the same time, you crave, the freedom to be able to continue on as the entrepreneur that you once were before you became a mom. And so that has been really hard for me too. And I just, something that I'll never forget is I did this live training last week, actually. And we'll talk about this on our therapy call together. But I did this live training last week, and I was so excited about it. I had 100 people signed up for it. I was putting all my extra moments of energy, which are very few, into this training. And I was sacrificing moments with him. The moments I was with him, he saw the back of my phone or my computer, which I hate so much.
Yeah.
And Matt put him to bed that night and he was screaming, crying because I didn't say goodnight to him. It's probably not why he was crying, but in my head, I was like, oh, maybe he misses me. And like, all of this stuff was happening. And long story short, I was like pitching all of these great perks at the end of it. And I know that's not why you do something for other people. It's service driven, but I had expectations for what this training was going to bring to my business, and they completely were shattered. And I remember waking up the next morning. I'm going to get emotional. You said you were going to make me cry, so here we go. Like, I remember waking up the next morning and like holding him and hugging him and being like, you know, everything I'm doing now for you. And like, I just want you to be proud of me. And like, I don't want to sacrifice moments with you for things that aren't going to work. So like, give me a sign that like I should keep going. And he like gave me a hug. Like my kids, like my dad calls him a nose tackle. Like he's like a bruiser. Like he doesn't stop moving. Like he doesn't cuddle. Like he'll cuddle when he doesn't feel good or if it's 4 o'clock in the morning. But besides that, he's like, go, go, go. And like he hugged me. And like that was all I needed to know, that like it's just going to take some time to rebuild. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That was really unexpected. But Jen, what parenting has taught me. And I think it's really just like that moment right there of like, you can have it all, but not all at once. And you have to remember to prioritize the things that really matter. And again, like I've said this before, I'm speaking from a space of privilege that like I have the privilege to have the option to stay home and raise my son. And I understand that that's not fair to say out loud for many other people. That is my reality in this moment. But my business is so important to me, and the people in my community are so important to me. And I want to figure out a way that I can have it all, and just it just might look different. And that's what I'm working on right now.
Jen, I love you, first of all.
I love you too.
Second of all, thank you so much for the transparency. You know, I had Kara Harpstreet on with the last pod, and we were talking about alignment. And she was talking about how, and for our listeners, obviously listening to this, you've already heard this episode, but she was talking about how intuitive eating for her has been that ripple effect, to not do things that are out of alignment, but to make sure that you're honed in. Right. And you joked kind of like with our therapy sessions that we all have amongst us parent entrepreneurs, because alignment is a really big thing. And I think, Jen, you just really gave me and our listeners such a huge gem, because when you're reminded that there are certain things that you are doing in life that are not in alignment, you're going to feel some sort of way. You're going to, right? And this is me speaking as a parent. There's been a multitude of times where I will sit back and sit in gratitude, and then also recognize that there are aspects of what I was doing in the past, or things that I was involved in that really didn't do anything for me. And it was taking time away. And like we had a conversation off air over text, and I really meant it, because it was like, hey, if you need some time with your little guy, I'm flexible, all good. Because I've always been that, I've also been that person that has come home just to see Callie holding Rory, just because she's doing something and it's taking time away from their bond. And so I just want to thank you for the transparency there, because I think in a lot of ways, we all have these moments where if we know something is out of alignment, or we know that something's not right, we have to have those healthy outlets. And if we don't have those healthy outlets, we have to start to think about and be curious about what it takes to get there. Because I think what you just described there, Jen, was healthy intuition, healthy alignment with going back to just your role as a mother, and just asking young Noah, like, hey, tell me that I'm doing the right thing here. And I think it takes a really self-aware and courageous person to ask that question. So I said it jokingly that I was going to make you cry, but thank you. But thank you for crying.
Well, it's clearly something that I needed today. And the Wi-Fi outage that my son caused couldn't keep us away, and there was a reason for it. And I've always respected you so much, Desi. I think that you are the example of leading with your heart. You always have been. You're so pure, and you put so much into everything that you do, and that's the ripple effect too. And this conversation was what I needed today. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I told you I like this to be organic. I do have questions that I ask all of our guests, and I always have a lot of fun with hearing what those answers are.
Okay.
Right now, with where you're sitting, obviously it's the Can't Believe I Made It podcast, right? So I always like to ask, do you believe that you have made it? And if not, what does making it look like for you?
I believe that I'm in the process of making it in a new way. I think that I've hit goals in my business in the past and in my life in the past, and I'm not done yet. So I'm going to keep going.
I'm so excited to see what happens, because I think you and I have talked about this off air, and I might spoil a little bit of what you're going through. But Jen, I'm along for the ride right now, and I'm really excited about what that holds for you, because I think one of the things, the sense that I get as your friend and colleague, is that you're heavily aligned with having very, very healthy relationships, especially when as it pertains to your husband and now young Noah, that you're going to do things for yourself and them, and you're going to allow that to be whatever it looks like for you, however that shapes out. Those two things,
so it's good to hear.
Yeah, those two things are going to continue to be drivers in your life. So I'm excited to continue as a friend, just to see where it goes, and to hit you up with questions that I have about just stuff that you are way more advanced than I am.
I don't know what those things are, but I'm happy to help.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Last question for you. Where can people find you? What projects are you engaged in right now that we can support you with? What excites you about next direction? Anything that you can share with us.
So I'm going to say this here first, because I started working on it last night. I had a light bulb moment, and
yes, I love those moments.
And nobody knows this yet. So, and I don't care when this launches. I can't wait for it to be said, but just everybody that's listening, I'm saying it here first. I'm working on an ebook, a free ebook, The Art of the Messy Bowl, because so many people message me whenever I post stupid recipes in my story. And I say stupid because they're not recipes. Like, my brain just must work differently, that when I see things in my fridge and I mix them together, people are like, what? And I'm recognizing now that it's something different, and I'm turning it into an ebook. For all of you, it's going to be free, and it is going to support the promotion and the wait list for our next round of group coaching that's going to launch in January. It's going to be better than it ever was before, because we've had the time to work on it and to fix any areas that we felt needed fixing. So that ebook is going to come out within the next couple weeks. Support and perks and discounts coming from that. Sign up for our group coaching program that will launch in January. And I'm working with a new coach, so there's going to be some new other things that pop up along the way, but those are two things that I'm super excited about, plus one-on-one coaching that we continuously have at Happy Strong Healthy. So I'm Jenna Werner. You can find me at happystronghealthy.rd on Instagram and TikTok, in addition to happystronghealthyrd.com. I have a team of registered dietitians who are amazing, Danielle and Lauren, and their one-on-one coaching is what we they're just amazing. That's the one-on-one coaching option for our business, plus group coaching. And then lastly, I co-host a podcast with one of my best friends, Sam Previtt, and that's the What the Actual Fork podcast. And that is it. I have appreciated this conversation more than you know. It filled my cup today, and I can't wait to re-listen to it when it launches.
Art of the Messy Bowl. I love that. A lot of people put a lot of expectations on themselves. Like, this doesn't look good. I'm like, is it balanced? Like, do you want to eat it? Then eat the damn food. Shit. Like,
All I make. Like I can't follow a recipe for shit. I can't. I cannot. I call myself an assembly cook. I assemble bowls, and I hate eating off a plate. Like last night, this will be the last thing because then we got to go. But I said to my husband last night, "Do you want your stuff on a bowl or a plate?" And he looked at me. He's like, "You're just gonna put it in a bowl." And he's like, "What are you asking?"
that's another pod for another time. Like, does it belong in a bowl or a plate? Oh my God, I have arguments with Callie about
There's
that all the
literally
time.
nothing that needs to be on a plate unless it's a
Yeah.
sandwich. Like,
All right, Jen, I know you got stuff to do. Thank you so much for taking some time for us. For our listeners out there, we'll make sure we put everything that Jenna is up to in the show notes. Please do yourself this favor. Go follow her. Aside from her amazing message, she's got killer dance moves. So head over to TikTok to see them. Oh, Jenna, I'm gonna press and record here, but don't leave because I want to say bye to you. But I love you, friend. Thank you so much for taking some time for the Can't Believe I Made It podcast. For our listeners out there, you already know the sign off by now. Got some big things dropping on my end, really big vulnerability projects. So I want to make sure that I am practicing what I'm preaching and doing hard things because that's how you seek fulfillment. So I'll catch you all later on the next pod.